There's a public hearing underway in Salem on the proposal to overhaul Oregon's drug laws. Democrats and Republicans recently agreed to major changes to Measure 110. They're discussing pages and pages of amendments right now. K2's Christina Giardinelli has been on your side listening to this hearing. She's live for us at the Capitol. Christina, what have they discussed in the last hour?
Yeah, so far I just walked out of this hearing to bring you the updates right now. The racial impact statement was being presented by Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. That's what we just heard on what the impacts to people of color are going to be with regards to these changes. And we'll break down some of those impacts here in just a second. But first off, let me tell you about some of the changes that these amendments have made so far to the original bill that Democrats proposed. Now, the biggest change is going to be the diversion program. So the program where somebody can meet with a caseworker instead of facing charges or going to jail. Those programs are now optional, so counties can opt in or out of those programs, and law enforcement will also have discretion on whether or not to offer those programs. Check out this flow chart that we created to help break down some of those changes. The changes mean if someone is arrested for possession in a county that opted in, officers would be able to either book the person in jail before sentencing, offer diversion, or cite and release. In counties that opted out, the police officer would either be able to book the suspect or cite and release them. Now, once they go to court, once the suspect is arraigned, if they show up to sentencing, the judge would be able to offer probation and no jail time at first. But if they violate that probation, they can face anywhere between a month to 6 months in jail. Now, if they fail to appear, they can face a Class A misdemeanor charge, which could mean up to a year in jail. In both cases, they would be required to have a public defender unless they can afford their own lawyer. Now, here's what the Criminal Justice Commission had to say about racial impacts here in this meeting.
What we have found is that when we break that down by racial groups and look at the raw differential representation, the only group for which we see there is a disparity is for African American or Black Oregonians. And what we see is that of those 2,200 additional convictions, we would estimate that 103 of those would be for Black or African American Oregonians, and that if we wanted to have parity with white individuals, at least based on census shares, we would need to see only 73 convictions. So the difference between that 103, and 74, 29 is the gap that we were identifying.
Welcome.
Now, you just heard from the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. That just happened in that hearing right now. We're going to head back in and listen into some more of that. We'll bring you more information coming up at 11 p.m. For now, live at the state capitol, Christina Giardinelli, K2 News.
Christina.
4 hours this evening, lawmakers heard testimony for and against proposed changes to Measure 110. DAs and law enforcement support those changes. Public defenders say they would make the public defense crisis much worse. Will changes to Measure 110 stop the open use of drugs on Oregon streets and the spike of overdose deaths? Some told lawmakers they are on the right track with amendments to a bill that would criminalize possession.
We believe the amendments represent a meaningful policy package that will provide our communities, behavioral health, and law enforcement partners the tools needed to begin to address our severe addiction crisis.
Others told lawmakers the measure represents a return to the war on drugs and won't help those battling addiction.
The bill will create a vicious cycle of people in and out of jail without connection to treatment. It's letting police and prosecutors decide who gets treatment and who gets jail.
Right now in Oregon, hundreds of people are facing charges while waiting months without a lawyer because of a public defender crisis. Some lawyers say this bill would make that problem much worse.
I ask you, where are you going to get the public defense attorneys to take these cases? There aren't any.
The bill would allow counties to opt in and out of programs that allow someone to skip charges by seeking treatment. Police officers would also have the discretion to decide who gets offered that diversion. Marion County already has a diversion program with counselors who have lived experience with addiction.
Had it not been for the accountability piece when I did get clean almost 5 years ago and the fear of going back to prison and never seeing my son again, I wouldn't be sitting here today working and partnering with law enforcement.
But some recovering addicts say prison and jail made their recovery process much more difficult.
I want to emphasize the harsh realities of county jail. It's a place where individuals are crammed into confined spaces with minimal access to fresh air and are provided with diets hardly fit for humans. Surprisingly, I found the conditions in prison to be comparatively better.
Tomorrow, lawmakers will likely vote on whether or not to send this bill out of committee. Once it leaves committee, it will go to the House floor for a vote and then to the Senate floor. We'll be following this bill and other bills closely this legislative session and bringing you the latest information. For now, live in Salem, Cristina Giartinelli, K2 News.